Hello and welcome to this episode of Albuquerque Business Review. I'm your host, Tony Della Flora. In the course of producing a video for the city several years ago, I came across a rare photo depicting Central Avenue about 1915. The photo, looking east on Central, showed the city at a transportation crossroads. The streetscape included horses and wagons, automobiles, and electric trolley tracks bisecting Central. Now, a century later, the transportation system may again be transformed, this time with a bus rapid transit system that will also bisect Central. With me today to discuss the impact of the rapid transit project is Gary Opedal, Director of the city's Economic Development Department. Welcome back to the show, Gary.
It's good to be with you, Tony, as always.
So much to cover here, but we'll get right into it. Obviously, there's been a lot of coverage of the controversy around this and some of the opposition. But, let's start with what the benefits of doing something like this bus rapid transit system are, at least why the city's behind this.
Sure. Well, first of all, let me acknowledge that there are issues for individual shop owners along Central. And as a business owner, I still have large interests in two businesses locally. I'm very sensitive to those, and that's why the community, with our support, is putting together a business resource collaboration to help these businesses along, and both in preparedness and in resiliency through the project. But our vision for this is that this is going to be just make Central into a bright, shiny penny, a place where people are going to want to drive up and down with a new bus rapid transit system that we call ART, and streetscapes and sidewalks and lighting improvements to make this into a place where people want to be. And that people who come to Albuquerque will see it and say, wow, this is fantastic. Also, a place where people can live, work, and play along that route.
Right.
We are trying to attract, and this is a huge economic development project.
And I think that's one of the issues. People think of it only as a transportation issue necessarily, but it's not.
First of all, there are three groups, because we did a national study last year, there are three groups of people who are interested in coming to Albuquerque. This is the millennials and the 28 to 32-year-olds specifically we are interested in because they're job creators. They've got enough experience and they now have their ideas of what they want to do just before they settle down to start having families. You've got your 50-plussers. These are people who want to come to Albuquerque to escape snowdrifts and tornadoes and hurricanes and tsunamis and earthquakes and all that stuff, and come to a place that is just got a huge, great quality of life as for their second stage. And they're bringing their incomes and their experience and their companies. And then the solo workers, the third type that is not talked about often, but I tell you, it's one of our fastest growing employment trends. And these are these solo workers that do project work for multiple companies or remote work for a company where they choose to live here even though they work for, say, Autodesk in the Bay Area. Those three groups of people are not only attracted to Albuquerque, not only are the job creators of the future, they have several things in common. One, they love diversity. Two, they love a vibrant downtown, mixed use, higher density. Three, they demand walkable, bikeable cities with good transit. And so we have to be looking forward. This is an opportunity to skate like Wayne Gretzky used to talk about, skate to where the puck is going to be versus lagging behind the rest of the country. And this is our chance to get into the 21st century and say, look, we got to have mass transit along here for many, many reasons, none the least of which is the best way to give a struggling family an $8,000 to $12,000 a year raise is to help them get rid of a car. And when I used to live in Europe, let me tell you something, there's no better way to build community is when you have that mixed-use, higher density atmosphere where you're walking or taking mass transit or biking to the grocery store and to get your flowers and your beer and whatever else, and building that community along this route. Over half the world's population now lives in cities. We just clicked that over last year. It's supposed to be 70% by 2040. What are we doing about that? We cannot stay with the paradigm of everybody, one person, one car. And this is a way to do that. The other side of this is that all along Central, you will see, and we have seen this now as it's being implemented in Cleveland and in Fort Collins, you will see what's called TOD, Transit-Oriented Development, all along Central, where people will be taking advantage of this brand new system all along the way, and they will fill up the vacant lots, repurpose the dilapidated buildings, and really put in place the workforce housing, the lofts, the restaurants, the hotels that are necessary along here. And remember, this is going to connect our really cool places in cool ways, because it's going to connect the convention center with the most visited place in New Mexico, which is the Bio Center, the zoo, with Nob Hill, with East Central, with West Central. So all these places will be really connected, and that's the key. And what we're seeing already, as we're starting to see developers coming and saying, okay, what can we do along this route? And remember, this is not just another bus. These are nice, quiet new systems that have pre-ticketing, dedicated lanes, and signal right-of-way. So basically, think about the last time you were at the airport. The doors open, people come off, people go on, doors close, and off your way again, every 7 minutes along Central. This is hugely different than the big rumbling bus that pulls over to the side and messes with traffic, and somebody has to find their change and plunk it in. None of that's going to happen. And you've got raised platform, roll on, roll off, whether you're in a wheelchair or your bicycle, so that people can use mixed forms of getting around, and it just integrates the city so well.
And what other aspects, for people who've not seen the plans or paid much attention to this, what is this route going to look like, essentially, in terms of the stops and everything in between?
Sure. Well, there's a lot of science behind this. What we're trying to do is make sure that we learn from all the other places that this has been implemented. And by the way, again, what we like to do, steal shamelessly from what's working elsewhere and adapt to our own resources and culture. Well, this is a 200th the cost of a light rail system, much less disruption to Central and to the businesses along the way, and a 2,000th the cost and disruption of a subway system. So this system is perfect for what our needs are. But basically, the ART system will have stops, at locations that make the most sense, and will run in its own dedicated center lane from about Coors to Louisiana. And then it will go into normal traffic, because it doesn't need dedicated lanes, because the traffic isn't sufficient to worry about. Also, there's going to be A and B buses. Every other bus is going to then connect down to our Uptown, Coronado, Winrock centers, and then back out and up and down Central. And this is the first big BRT project. The second then, which will come in right after this, is going to connect the Health Sciences Center out to the airport. So eventually you'll be able to get from anywhere in the city out to the airport and back. Imagine when you go to a city, and I'll use Denver as an example. And I hope there's nobody here from Denver who loves Denver watching, but I hate it. I mean, the airport's in another city basically. It's so far away from downtown. It's so hard to get to. Imagine coming to Albuquerque. Well, how do I get downtown? What do I do? Well, imagine when you'll eventually be able to connect straight from a nice system all the way to downtown and to the convention center and to the biopark and to anywhere you want to be along this corridor.
Great. I wanted to ask you real quick, though, before you mentioned the cost briefly. There's been a few numbers floated around about what the total cost of this project is and how much of it is federal money. What are those numbers?
Sure.
As best as you know at this point?
Last week, what we got from the Fast Starts program from the federal government was a $69.7 million. That was the last piece we needed that joins in with $30 million of other federal money, money that's part of our complete streets that we've been working on with City Council to make sure that as we do this project, we work on sidewalks and lighting and parking along Central to make it more of that place you want to meander around and be a part of. And then the last bit was $13 million that the City Council appropriated and has been sold for bonds for this project. So all in all, it's about $120 million. That price hasn't changed. We just were waiting on that last bit from the feds to be able to describe the entire project.
And just real quickly, I know some people have said, well, we should be spending that money on the homeless and stuff. And there's only certain things you can spend that money for, right? I mean,
It's
not a giant pot of money that you can just distribute everywhere.
That's right. The only thing we can spend any of these pots of money that have been cobbled together is on a bus rapid transit system.
Right. Okay.
Mass transit.
All right. I just wanted to get that out.
This
of the way.
comes from the FTA, the Federal
Yeah.
Transit Authority,
Right.
and that money is only to be used on transit.
So to get back to where we were at the beginning, in terms of the controversy, again, the focus has been on the opposition and mainly, again, as far as I know, in the Nob Hill area. But as I told you before, I was talking to some of my inside sources about what's going on, and in fact, in other parts of the city, there seems to be a lot of people for this project and waiting to see it, and especially like commuters maybe who live on the west side and want an easier way to get into work downtown or something. But what's your impression of what's going on out there generally in the community in terms of the support for this?
There are some people in some parts of the community that don't understand why we need it on Central. People who are determined to stay in their cars and they live in the far suburbs, and even they hopefully will understand eventually they'll be able to park easily someplace and be able to park once and then get things done along that route.
Right.
There are others in the community. Well, the millennials are way vastly in favor of it. Our Millennial Albuquerque ABQ group that was formed a couple years ago is really staunchly behind it. Millennials, quite frankly, it's almost an anti. They wouldn't even move to a city. They wouldn't stay in a city that doesn't have some sort of mass transit. And they aren't really looking for that 4-bedroom house in the suburbs anymore. They're looking for that vibrant, mixed-use, higher density downtown atmosphere. And so there's many groups outside of this directly affected area who are for and against it. Rarely have I seen in the world of government in my brief existence so far, something that everyone's 100% for.
Right, exactly.
We know, though, and from the studies that have been done, from the national movements and momentum, that we've got to have mass transit long term, and we think that this is something that will be a great catalyst for the city. If you think about it, the taxpayers are doing a small fraction of this with respect to the feds. And the returns are going to be, 10x in gross receipts tax alone, but 100 to 1,000x in the associated development along the way.
Right. Well, what about even you don't deny there is going to be some impact on the businesses, and
Of
what
course.
do you think are the things that are unavoidable, and again, what is the city attempting to do to mitigate that?
So if you look at the businesses along Central, what we're trying to do is look at the categories of businesses. Some businesses that are on Central really don't depend on foot traffic, and they don't depend on traffic in front or parking or anything like that. Others heavily depend on that. So what we're doing is trying to prioritize the businesses and figure out who could use that help first. So we're trying to come up with all kinds of creative ways to help those businesses in, doing cash mobs the month before and the month after to try to drum up business. What the business owners, and we met with the business owners already last week, right after the announcement, we met with a whole room full of business owners in Nob Hill, for instance, and we listened to them, and they had some very creative suggestions for parking during construction and what they would like to see. We had committed at least one lane open in both directions the entire time in front. And they were saying, well, that's great, but wait a minute, maybe we can schedule it to where it's outside of the time where we make most of our money. It's like, oh, that's good input to our schedule. So we're listening intently to minimize, but we know that there is going to be impact. And what we're doing is working with those community groups and other groups to say, hey, what can we do to help with marketing? What can we do for telling your story? What can we do? And a lot of them are saying, we don't necessarily want handouts, but we do want customers. So how can we create new customers and keep their existing customers during the project? Because we know we'll have more access to customers afterwards.
Right.
But we want to make sure that we can survive through it so that we can take advantage of that at the end.
Great. I know, like everything else you're involved in, this is being fast-tracked as quickly as possible. What's the schedule for when this is going to be implemented?
We'd like to start in May of this year, so we're talking about in just a few months. We're specifically waiting on a letter from the FTA that gives us the go-ahead to start working on these projects, and we want to be done by fall of 17. We'd like this first leg to be done before Mayor leaves office.
Great, great. Well, I'm curious to see how this whole thing's going to unfold. It should be quite a production, quite a project, and hopefully benefit the city. We'll see.
We think it will, and we think it's going to benefit the city in ways that people aren't even considering at this point.
Yeah. Well, Gary, thanks again for being here with us. And thank you for joining us on Albuquerque Business Review. I'm your host, Tony Della Flora, and I'll see you next time.